J.J. Vallow was 7 years old. He loved superheroes. He gave the warmest hugs. Tylee Ryan was 16. She dreamed of becoming a nurse. She protected her little brother like he was her own child. They trusted their mother completely, and she betrayed them in the most unimaginable way. Now, finally, after years of investigation, after months of legal proceedings, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell will answer for what they did. This is part 3. The finale. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, go watch them now. For everyone ready for justice, subscribe, hit like, and let's see this through to the end. The journal was found in a cardboard box in Chad Daybell's home office, tucked between stacks of his self-published novels and religious pamphlets. On the outside, it looked ordinary. A cheap black notebook, lined pages, careful handwriting. But inside was a record of madness. Investigators handled it with gloves, photographing every page before they dared read it. What they uncovered was a window into Chad's mind, a detailed, step-by-step descent into delusion, stretching back years, a roadmap to murder. Chad had created an entire system for categorizing the people in his life. Everyone received a numerical spiritual rating, on a scale only he fully understood. Those who believed his visions and prophecies were graded as light and highly ranked. Those who questioned him, challenged his authority, or stood in the way of his desires, slid down the scale into darkness. The journal also recorded the visions Chad claimed to receive from beyond the veil. He wrote about spirits visiting him in the night, warning of the coming apocalypse and confirming his special role in preparing the righteous. He described conversations with dead ancestors, with angels, with supposed ancient prophets. Every entry reinforced the same message. Chad Daybell was chosen. Chad Daybell was important. Chad Daybell was above ordinary rules. But it was the entries about specific people that made prosecutors' hands shake as they turned the pages. Charles Vallow appeared with a note stating that his spirit had been replaced by a dark entity called Ned Schneider. According to Chad, Charles was no longer the man Lori had married. His body, Chad wrote, had become a vessel for something evil. The entry was dated months before Charles's death. On paper, in Chad's own words, was proof that Charles's killing had been planned, discussed, and theologically justified long before Alex Cox pulled the trigger. Tammy Daybell's entries followed a similar pattern. Chad described his wife of nearly 30 years as possessed and dark. He wrote that Tammy's original spirit had left, and that what remained was a zombie wearing her face. That entry was dated just weeks before Tammy's sudden death. Again, in Chad's own handwriting, was a clear record of intent. He wasn't grieving a sick wife. He was preparing to get rid of a spiritual obstacle. And then, there were the children. J.J. Vallow was described as having been taken over by a dark spirit. Chad wrote that J.J.'s true soul had gone, replaced by something evil merely imitating the little boy Lori had loved. He even suggested J.J.'s autism was a sign of the supposed corruption. Tylee Ryan received similar treatment. Chad claimed her teenage behavior was proof her spirit had been displaced. He labeled her dangerous, a threat to the so-called mission he and Lori believed they had been called to complete. In these pages, J.J. and Tylee weren't children anymore. They were obstacles. The journal read like scripture for a new religion in which Chad and Lori were the chosen ones, and anyone who stood in their way could be marked for death. Prosecutors understood immediately what they were holding. This wasn't just evidence. This was the key to the entire case. It proved premeditation. It proved a shared belief system that justified murder. And it proved that the deaths of Charles, Tammy, J.J., and Tylee were not isolated tragedies. They were calculated killings, committed in the name of a twisted faith. The road to trial was not straightforward. In the summer of 2021, as prosecutors prepared their case against Lori Vallow, her defense team raised concerns about her mental state. In jail, Lori had become increasingly erratic. She talked about visions and prophecies. She insisted her children were still alive, not on earth, but translated to a higher plane. She seemed detached from reality, unable to grasp the charges against her or properly assist her lawyers. A court-ordered psychological evaluation confirmed it. Lori Vallow was declared unfit to stand trial. She was transferred to the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, sent to a secure psychiatric facility, where doctors began trying to stabilize her. For the families of the victims, the delay was torture. Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother, had already waited nearly 2 years for justice. Tammy Daybell's children had lost their mother and now watched their father sit in jail while Lori received medical treatment instead of a jury trial. Charles Vallow's loved ones had seen his killer, Alex Cox, die before facing court, and now the woman they believed had orchestrated his death was sitting in a hospital, not a prison. For almost a year, Lori remained in treatment. With medication and therapy, her grip on reality slowly improved. By early 2022, evaluators concluded that she was competent. She now understood the charges and could participate in her defense. At last, the trial could begin. April 2023, Boise, Idaho. The Ada County Courthouse had seen big cases before, but nothing like this. News crews lined the streets. Satellite trucks crowded the curb. Reporters from across America fought for space on the courthouse steps. Inside, every seat in the gallery was taken. Family members of the victims, local residents, and true crime followers who've been watching this case unfold for years. All of them focused on one person, Lori Vallow Daybell. She entered the courtroom in prison attire. The bright, camera-perfect woman, once seen sunbathing in Hawaii, was gone. Her hair was thinner, grayer, her face drawn and pale after years in custody. She walked slowly to the defense table, her expression blank, eyes distant. The charges were staggering. First-degree murder of J.J. Vallow. First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell. Grand theft for stealing life insurance money after Charles Vallow's death. Multiple conspiracy counts tying her to each death in this sprawling case. Prosecutor Lindsay Blake stood to deliver the opening statement. She didn't hold back. Blake laid out the evidence clearly and ruthlessly. The text messages between Lori and Chad, the zombie labels, the religious framework they'd used to justify killing. She walked the jury through the cell phone records that placed Alex Cox at Chad's property on the exact days the children disappeared. She showed photographs of the burial sites, the black plastic, the duct tape, the tiny, bound form of JJ, the burned fragments of Tylee. Then she reminded the jury who these victims really were. J.J. Vallow was 7 years old, Blake said. He had autism. He needed extra care, extra patience, extra love. And his mother decided that made him expendable. She decided his challenges meant his soul was corrupted. She decided he wasn't really her son anymore. Tylee Ryan was 16, a normal teenager with normal struggles. She wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to help people. And her mother decided that her spirit had been replaced by something dark. She decided her daughter was a zombie who needed to be eliminated. These were not acts of mercy. These were not acts of love. These were cold, calculated murders committed by a woman who had abandoned basic human morality. The tone of the trial was set. Over the following weeks, witness after witness took the stand. Friend from Arizona described how Lori changed after meeting Chad, how their conversations shifted from everyday life to doomsday prophecies and spiritual warfare. They recalled Lori talking about people becoming dark, about souls being replaced, about an approaching apocalypse that would cleanse the wicked from the earth. Investigators presented the digital evidence: cell phone data, text messages, the journal, emails, photos. They walked the jury through the timeline, showing how each victim was labeled a zombie before their death, and how each death benefited Lori or Chad financially, romantically, or both. Forensic experts described what had been done to the children, how Tylee's body had been dismembered and burned, an intentional attempt to destroy her identity, how JJ was wrapped in plastic and tape, his hands bound. Medical examiners explained Tammy Daybell's death. Subtle signs of asphyxiation that were missed at first, but became obvious under serious scrutiny. And through it all, Lori sat at the defense table, staring straight ahead. No visible emotion, no visible reaction. But the coldest moments of the trial didn't come from experts. They came from the people who had loved the victims. Lori's eldest son, Colby Ryan took the stand. He was 27, a husband, a father, and now a man testifying against his own mother. She was the best mom, Colby said, his voice cracking. Growing up, she was everything to me. She made me feel safe, loved, protected. I don't know what happened to that person. I don't know where she went. He spoke about Tylee, the sister he'd grown up with, the aunt his children would never know, the girl who wanted to become a nurse. Tylee was my best friend, he said through tears. She was the one I called when I needed advice. She always told me the truth. She would have helped so many people, and now she's gone. He spoke about JJ, the little boy who called him Bubba, who loved superheroes, who filled every room with energy. JJ trusted his mom, Colby said. He loved her more than anything. He would have done anything for her. And she took that love and destroyed it. When asked about Lori's claims that the children were zombies, Colby didn't hesitate. Tylee was not a zombie. JJ was not a zombie. They were my siblings. They were innocent. They deserved to live. And my mom took that from them. She took it from all of us. Then came Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother. She had been the one to first raise the alarm, the one who wouldn't allow the children to simply fade away from public memory. JJ was my grandson, Kay told the jury, voice steady but full of grief. But he was more than that. He was my heart. She described how Lori had stepped in when JJ's biological parents couldn't cope, and how, at first, she believed Lori was giving JJ a better life. I thought she loved him like I did, Kay said. I was wrong. She told the court about the phone calls that stopped, the texts that went unanswered, the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. When Lori stopped returning my calls, I knew, Kay said. A grandmother knows. Her voice hardened as she described the moment she realized the truth. She killed him. She killed my grandson and ignored my call for months while I begged to know where he was. Later, during her victim impact statement, Kay looked directly at Lori. Lori, you were meant to protect JJ. He trusted you completely. He would have walked through fire for you. And you repaid that trust by killing him. You wrapped him in plastic. You buried him in a field. You left him alone in the cold ground while you lay on a beach in Hawaii. There is no punishment that can bring him back. But at least you will never hurt another child. At least you will live with the knowledge of what you did until the day you die. The courtroom was silent. On the 12th of May, 2023, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of J.J. Vallow, guilty. First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, guilty. Conspiracy to murder Tammy Daybell, guilty. Grand theft, guilty. Conspiracy charges, guilty. Lori Vallow Daybell didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead as if she were watching someone else's trial. A month later, Judge Stephen Boyce pronounced sentence, life in prison, no possibility of parole. The court finds that you are remorseless, he told her. You have shown no sign of accepting responsibility, no apology, no acknowledgement of the suffering you've caused. The evidence was overwhelming. The victims deserved so much better. You deserve to spend the rest of your life reflecting on what you have done. Lori was led from the courtroom in shackles, her future reduced to concrete walls, metal doors, and razor wire. She was sent to the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center, where she will die behind bars. But the story was not over. Chad Daybell still had to face his own judgment day. May 2024. More than 4 years after the children's bodies were found on his land, Chad Daybell went on trial in the same Boise courtroom. Like Lori, he faced first-degree murder charges for JJ and Tylee. But he also faced an additional count, the murder of his first wife, Tammy. Unlike Lori, Chad had no mental health defense, no claim of incompetence. He sat in court, alert, composed, and still convinced he had done nothing wrong. The evidence against him was even stronger. His own journal documented the zombie designations. The bodies had been buried on his property. His phone records matched Alex Cox's movements around the times of the killings. His text messages to Lori and Alex showed planning, coordination, and celebration. Tammy's children testified about their father's transformation. A once loving dad who became distant and obsessed after meeting Lori. A grieving widower who remarried suspiciously just 2 weeks after his wife died. Emma Murray, Chad's daughter, gave particularly damning testimony. "I wanted to believe he was innocent," she said. "He was my dad. I loved him, but I cannot deny what I've seen. My mom was murdered. Those children were murdered, and my father was responsible." The prosecution argued that Chad was the architect of everything. He had created a theology. He had declared people dark. He had told Lori her husband was possessed, that her children were zombies. He had encouraged Alex to act as his enforcer, while keeping his own hands as clean as possible. And when Tammy stood between him and a new life with Lori, he got rid of her, too. Forensic evidence on Tammy's body showed signs of restraint, subtle bruising, and indicators of asphyxiation, all consistent with being smothered in her sleep. Chad's lawyers tried to blame Lori. They painted him as a naive spiritual seeker dragged into madness by a manipulative woman. The jury didn't buy it. On the 30th of May, 2024, Chad Daybell was found guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. First-degree murder of J.J. Vallow. First-degree murder of Tammy Daybell. Multiple conspiracy charges. A week later, the same jury sentenced him to death. Chad Daybell now sits on death row at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, awaiting an appeals process that may take years. He spends his days in a small cell, cut off from the followers who once believed he was a prophet. Lori Vallow Daybell serves her life sentence in Pocatello. Her beauty has faded. Her prophecies have not come true. The date Chad once predicted for the apocalypse, July 22nd, 2020, came and went like any other day. The world did not end. The righteous were not gathered. The tribulation never began. They destroyed their families and ended innocent lives for nothing. But if you remember anything from this case, remember the victims for who they were, not how they died. J.J. Vallow will be 13 today. He loved Spider-Man, Captain America, and giving hugs to anyone who needed one. He worked hard to overcome the challenges of autism, celebrating tiny victories with huge joy. His grandmother, Kay, still talks to him every morning, promising him that justice was done and that he is not forgotten. Tylee Ryan would be 21. She wanted to become a nurse, to help people. She was fiercely protective of JJ, often acting as his carer and constant companion. She had her mother's looks, but sharp, no nonsense with all her own. Her brother Colby tells his children stories about the aunt they will never meet. Tammy Daybell would be 54, a devoted mother, a beloved teacher, a quiet pillar of her community. She trusted her husband. She never imagined he would plan her murder as she slept beside him. Charles Vallow would be 66, a successful businessman who loved his family deeply. He tried to warn people about Lori's spiraling behavior. He filed court documents. He begged for help. He died trying to protect his son. And then there's Alex Cox, the man who killed at Lori's command, who buried bodies and lied without blinking. He died alone at 49 on the bathroom floor. Whether he was silenced by others, collapsed under the weight of his guilt, or met some other fate, we may never know. His secrets went with him. The Lori Vallow Daybell case is one of the most disturbing criminal conspiracies in recent American history. It's a story of religious extremism twisted into a weapon, a story of love corrupted beyond recognition, a story of children failed by the very systems meant to protect them. But above all, it's a story we cannot afford to forget. Because the most terrifying part isn't that monsters exist. It's that, for a time, they looked completely normal. They smiled in family photos. They posted inspirational quotes online. They went to church, volunteered, hosted parties, raised children, until they didn't. Lori Vallow looked like a loving mother. Chad Daybell looked like a devoted husband and father. Their friends and neighbors never suspected the darkness beneath the surface. And by the time anyone realized what they truly were, it was too late. So pay attention to the people around you. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Speak up when you see red flags. Fight for the vulnerable. Demand answers when children suddenly disappear. JJ's teacher saw him every day, until one day they didn't. Tylee's friends noticed she'd stop replying. Family members begged for answers and were ignored. The signs were there. The warnings were clear. And still, 2 children ended up buried in the backyard, wrapped in plastic, hidden in shallow graves, left by the very person who was supposed to protect them. Remember their names: J.J. Vallow, Tylee Ryan, Tammy Daybell, Charles Vallow. Remember what was done to them. Remember who did it. Remember why it was allowed to happen. And never, ever let it happen again. The sun still rises over Salem, Idaho. The fields stretch toward the mountains, just as they always have. The house where J.J. and Tylee were buried has been demolished. The ground has been cleared. There's no plaque, no memorial, nothing to show that this was once a crime scene that shocked the world. But we remember. And as long as we remember, J.J., Tylee, Tammy, and Charles are not entirely gone. They live on in the pursuit of justice that finally held their killers to account, and in stories like this one, told so that nothing like it is ever allowed to happen again. This case changed how investigators respond to missing children across America. It highlighted the dangers of unchecked religious extremism. It reminded us that evil can wear a friendly face and live just over the fence. And it proved something else. No matter how carefully killers cover their tracks, no matter how elaborate their excuses, justice has a way of finding the truth. Lori Vallow will die in prison. Chad Daybell waits on death row, his prophecies exposed as lies. They thought they were chosen by God. They thought they were above the law. They thought they could kill without consequence. They were wrong. If this story shook you, you're not alone. The Lori Vallow case has haunted millions, forcing us to confront dark truths about faith, family, and trust. But this is not the only case like it. There are more stories, more disappearances, more crimes that will keep you up at night. If you want more deep-dive documentaries into the darkest criminal cases in history, subscribe now and turn on notifications. The next story is already in the works, and you're not ready for it. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And whatever you do, don't watch the next one alone. Before you go, tell me in the comments, do you think Lori was truly mentally ill, or did she know exactly what she was doing? I read every theory. I want to hear yours. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.